of sharing. Durian ASEAN.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Good morning, this is Arlene and you're listening to Durian ASEAN. As usual, at our Tuesday morning, we'll bring you ASEAN Daily, where we comment on the news of the day. So today, we start out with the situation that is happening in Myanmar right now, where 100 deaths and 1 million people are homeless due to Myanmar's flood. The number of people affected by the flooding across Myanmar has near to 1 million on Sunday, and with waters in the low-lying southwestern delta inundating homes and forcing villages into temporary shelters. And critics has charged the nominally civilian government running the country for not being quick enough to help those in need. This seems to be in a similar fashion of what had happened in Malaysia earlier this year in Kelantan. And most of the help in Myanmar that came are unfortunately also by volunteers ferrying noodles, rice and clean water door to door in small boats. Heavy monsoon rains that began in late June, compounded more recently by Cyclone Command, have triggered some of Myanmar's worst flash flood and landslides. In fact, globally, the United Nations has pledged $9 million in assistance in the past week, but so far most help has come from, unfortunately, just private citizens and non-governmental organizations. But I have to mention that kudos to Thailand because it was an early aid donor for Myanmar's flood, sending 5 million baht for flooding relief a week ago. On the other hand, something that is not really happening really well in Malaysia. Also another landslide, but this time is on Malaysia's stock exchange. Malaysia's scandals feel fastest foreign exodus as stocks sink. So foreign funds have pulled a net of 11.7 billion ringgit, or equivalent to $3 billion for the nation's share of this year, as the benchmark FTSE Bursa Malaysia KLCI index retreated 4.5%. The ringgit has slumped to its weakest since 1998 financial crisis after tumbling 11% against the dollar, the biggest decline among Asian currencies. And according to Miso Das, a strategist at Nomura Holding Incorporated in Singapore, he said that already shaky trust of foreign investors is being eroded, of course, due to the political scandal of 1MDB. And this is not doing well for Malaysia. The further we see the scandal evolve, the more the trust and confidence of foreign investors will be eroded. So the Prime Minister of Malaysia and his team needs to figure it out how to solve this. And for the people, what we want is, of course, transparency by the government. The same goes with investors. They want a stable and a transparent government, which is what Malaysia needs to focus right now, especially in its politics. On the other hand, talking about politics, US is, of course, on high gear where it wins support from GCC Asian allies for Iran nuclear deal. So the Obama administration seems on course on its approach to deepening U.S. security cooperation with the Gulf nations as means to reassure and win over its Arab Gulf allies to support the Iran nuclear deal, a process that began on May 14 at the Camp David Summit. The foreign minister of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, of course on short with ASEAN, together with Australia, China, India, Japan, Korea, New Zealand and Russia, released a statement actually welcoming the deal. President Obama said in delight that every nation in the world that has commented publicly, with the exception of Israeli government, has expressed support, which is great news. On the other hand, former Iranian President Ayatollah Hashemi Rafsanjani said that it seems that Americans want to somewhat distance themselves from their past. I guess he's mentioning about the Bush administration. And this is something that must be proven in action. So yeah, Obama seems in his last speech as the president of the US, but he seems to be making a lot of progress, especially in the US foreign policy, making a lot of progress in trust globally towards the U.S. International relation. On the other hand, talking about China, gladly, China say it has stopped its controversial island building projects in the South China Sea. As we all know, one of the biggest unhappiness by ASEAN is the land reclamation activities, which include the building of artificial islands and buildings on the islands itself. And China and ASEAN, the great thing is, has agreed to expedite Code of Conduct negotiation for the South China Sea, as was done by India and Bangladesh recently using the mechanisms provided under the United Nations Law of the Sea. Wang told the forum that China is the real victim to the South China Sea, pointing to what he said was the occupation of some of its islands there, including by the Philippines. So we are having like some sort of he says, she says kind of thing. Well, the Philippines and Vietnam are saying that China is bullying them, but on the other hand, China say they are the real victim. But to add salt to the injury, apparently Japan has been cooperating with the United States to hype up the China threat or the Chinese threat, making noise for alliance to interfere with the South China Sea. This is the probably cry wolf by China, and this is being expressed by Su Xiaohui, a senior researcher at the Foreign Ministry-backed China Institute of Worldwide Studies. However, last week, we also see that Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi claimed that the land reclamation program has already stopped. But according to one source, an ASEAN diplomatic told that Chinese official said the construction on the islands built for reclaimed land would continue. This is really confusing. Maybe there should be an official answer by just one person rather than different people say different things. Anyway, we'll take one short break. When we return, we'll talk more about climate change, especially in relation to the recent Myanmar flood. And we'll also talk more about the economic side of Southeast Asia.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene, and of course, you're still with me on ASEAN Daily. So to continue the discussion about climate change. Earlier on, we reported about an update regarding on Myanmar floods. Of course, this is not an isolated case. Apparently, according to some experts, climate change, which already affected or is affecting ASEAN region through more intense and frequent heat waves, drought, floods, tropical cyclones. In fact, it will become even more severe. And this is because most of the population and economic activities is concentrated along coastlines, is heavily reliant on agricultural and has a high dependence on natural resources and forestry. This is, of course, according to Peter King. He is a senior policy advisor of the Japan-based Institution for Global Environmental Strategies. And high level of poverty would only make people more vulnerable, as we see 1 million people in the Myanmar floods just literally went homeless. Not to forget that earlier this year, the flood in Kelantan, and of course the flooding in some part of Jakarta also has made a lot of people in a situation that is definitely vulnerable. And to quote King, he said that the ASEAN Development Bank studies as projecting a 4.8 degrees Celsius rise in average annual temperature and a 70 centimeter rise in average sea level by 2100 in Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, with potential disastrous consequences, especially for megacities. And in Southeast Asia, megacities seems to be the emerging trend right now. You see a greater Kuala Lumpur linking with Singapore, and you're seeing that Jakarta, as usual, is a really large city. The same goes with Bangkok and other mega cities that will be definitely affected by climate change. But not all news is bad news. So apparently, a deal is signed for the largest ASEAN wind farm near the Mekong River in the south of Laos. Wind farm is it's not that common in Southeast Asia, but it's definitely an emerging trend, adopting a more renewable energy sources for this region. The renewable company Impact Energy Asia, or short for IEA, plans to build the largest wind farm in ASEAN and generate 600 megawatts or 400,000 rai in southern Laos under an agreement signed by the Lao government and the company. Called Monsoon Wind Farm, the US $1.5 billion farm will be located near the Mekong River across the Ubud Ratchathani, and this is according to Woramol Kamkanis, who is heading the firm. About 95% of the power is expected to be sold to ASEAN markets, mainly to Thailand and buyers bordering the Mekong region. The project is also critical to Thailand's energy need. And the project will also play a key role in the ASEAN power grid policy to sell power from Laos via Thailand and Malaysia grids to Singapore, which has pledged to buy Lao power to assist one of the poorer members in the group. And this is a great news, partly because we can reduce carbon footprint. As we all know, the reducing carbon footprint will be the way forward in creating a more sustainable development. In fact, 750,000 tons of carbon emissions by coal power plant can be avoided just by building this large-scale wind farm. And on the other hand, a more controversial form of renewable energy has also been discussed and being suggested, which is nuclear energy. Southeast Asian countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand are preparing to use more nuclear energy, and that development has raised concern about how safe and secure it is for Asia. People might be more accepting if they knew more about the construction, operation, monitoring, regulation, and administration of nuclear power plant. The problem is governments are not that transparent when it comes to nuclear energy. Of course, we also have bad experience with what had happened in the Fukushima power plant, nuclear power plant meltdown. But fast forward to 2015, with progress being made in technology, nuclear energy is in fact safer than ever. The legal framework is still questionable. Institutions and industry practice still need to ensure that they practice the highest level of transparency, and hopefully that this will pave the way for a more safer and a more widespread use of the renewable energy, which is nuclear energy. Of course, at the core of this, good leadership and good governance are critical. We see that countries that have adopted nuclear energy successfully are countries that have, in fact, good governance and good leadership. Anyway, we'll take another one short break. When we return, we will discuss more on the business side of Southeast Asia.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene. We are back again on ASEAN Daily. So, talking about CSR, or long for Corporate Social Responsibility. There are more than 500 delegates from 25 countries will be taking part in the 14th Asian Forum on Corporate Social Responsibility. In fact, it is the Asia's largest conference on the issue, and it will be held in Bangkok. And the focus will be, of course, on more towards social entrepreneurship, creating small partnership between businesses, government, and social sector to address major challenges facing Asian communities. Among the best mind of the CSR in the region is award-winning entrepreneur Anna Stock. She will be there, and she's the co-founder of Lumit 8 Lab, where she will share the story behind the birth and advancement of an idea that is becoming one of the most important essentials in disaster relief. There you go. So hopefully there will be very interesting outcome coming out from this Corporate Social Responsibility Forum next month. On the other hand, Switzerland, of course, when you think about Switzerland, besides, the beautiful scenery and the Alps, is the banks. Swiss banks are stepping up in battling for Asia's super rich. Switzerland's wealth managers have long courted Asia's super rich amid slowing growth at home and an international crackdown on its bank secrecy rules, and have made the country a less attractive place to keep cash. But the competition has recently shifted up a gear, with a new boss of Credit Suisse signaling that he also wants to embark on a similar path. There you go, new competitor. Asia is a highly banked market. This is according to Claude Herbera, head of Swiss bank Pictet's wealth management business in Asia. In fact, Asians in general are willing to try out a bank, but you have to explain what you're going to bring to the table. There you go. We are very picky people, I guess. Why the attraction on Asia? According to Boston Consulting Group, they forecasted that private wealth in the Asia Pacific, excluding Japan, will grow on average by 9.7% a year through to 2019, more than double the rate in the Western European countries. There you go. You want the super rich in Asia? Now is the best time for you to get them. On the other hand, unfortunately, the automobile industry is not doing well. Asian vehicle sales dropped by 16% in the second quarter of 2015. Sales deteriorated in Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia. New vehicle sales in Southeast Asia deteriorated significantly in the second quarter. Sales volumes in the region's 6 main market combined declined by almost 16% to 676,865 units in the second quarter, compared to 804,886 units in the same period of last year, reflecting a sharp lowered demand in the three largest markets, Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia. By contrast, sales in Southeast Asia's three smallest reported market, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Singapore, interestingly, continue to grow strongly. Maybe more and more people are realizing that car is not the only way to move around. Maybe we should get a public transportation rather than a car. So anyway, on the other hand, talking about sales, Samsung Display to invest extra $3 billion to boost Vietnam output. Samsung Display spending planned to run until 2020, and parent Samsung boasting Vietnam smartphone production. Samsung Display in 2014 disclosed $1 billion investment plan. And there you go, a subsidiary of the Samsung Electronics plan to increase the investment in Vietnam by adding the $3 billion to boost display module production capacity. And seems like Samsung is definitely trying to outdo its competitor in this case with the $3 billion spending. On the other hand, we will talk more about the arts and culture after the song break.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene. Welcome back. So NTU student or Nanyang Technology University students from Singapore had built a hall in Laos University, and it took them 2 years and 161 students who would spend 2 weeks at a time during their school holiday to complete the hall. It is the largest facility built by students for the village. The three of the projects they have completed are a primary school, clean water distribution infrastructure, and sanitation infrastructure. In return, the villagers hosted the students in their homes and prepared them daily meals. There you go. Even though you are still a student, you can still do a lot of great things for other communities in the region. Talking about communities, well, we can't help but thinking about, the best way to celebrate among communities is, of course, when there's a wedding. But unfortunately, in Indonesia, there's a rise of wedding financing with a budget of roughly 100 million rupiah, or equivalent to $7,400. Anjing and Edo's wedding, like most Indonesian wedding, would include 3 parts: an Islamic ceremony or akad nikah, a traditional Javanese ceremony, and a wedding reception. But unlike most weddings in Indonesia, where the parents are expected to pay for the occasions, they have to foot their own bill. And Indonesia weddings are notoriously costly. So choose your partner wisely. Depending on the ethnic group, religious belief, an Indonesian wedding ceremony can last 1 to 3 days, and the pensions for getting together means that big weddings attended by hundreds of thousands of guests is in fact a norm. The average cost of a wedding reception for 500 guests, including honeymoon, comes up to 116 million rupiah, almost triple the average annual income. How can even an ordinary Indonesian lad be able to foot such a bill? This is where the startup company in Indonesia, Bara Sejahtera, comes in and try to reel in young couple like Anjing and Edo through its website called Wedlite, Wedlite. The company is partnering with local multi-finance firm, a non-bank financing institution that typically provide credit for purchases of everything from cars to household electronics to help young couples to reach their wedded Bliss. Since its founding in January, Wetlight has attracted at least 2 local multi-finance companies. And this is definitely doing very well for the small startup, as BFI Finance Indonesia and Batavia Prosperindo Indonesia are looking at investing in that company. That's all from me today, and you can always catch up with Durian ASEAN via social media through our Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And you can listen to our podcast at YouTube. Search for Durian ASEAN or Durian ASEAN TV, and you can always listen to us live at www.durianasean.com or via your mobile by downloading our Durian ASEAN app and listen to us while you are on the go.